But they had, first day they passed out cards, everybody put up posters in them, that there are vans that they come, vans that can really walk. The vans are painted and named like the Avengers, and hers is Fiber Van. I know, but, so it's, well, more fun than just a weekend. And, they got the cell number. So, they're all night long. And the kids exactly use the bars, they call it number, and the van will come down. The van has a driver and a navigator and kids back there who are talking to them. And the navigator is sending info back to this room in the church where they're saying, okay, we got 12 minutes. And where you want to where this person needs to go to their motel or whatever. So they got that line to talk to about Jesus. And I was very drunk, so I was not going to remember that. Yeah.
Actually, Galveston was having problems. They had to actually.
Did they? So they, Florida said, we don't want you. Yeah.
Because they're getting too wild.
In our hotels. Yeah. And we don't want the liability. Yeah. But they're in a room and they've got a screen on there. All these little screens from all the bands with the names of the kids and what they're saying. Somebody's right there. Pray for him. He's, drunk or whatever. Full of kids. Like 2 to 6, the mother said, she said, I have no idea. She did. That one motel room has 6 boys to a room, but it's because they're not ever here. Anyway.
Hey.
Hi. Show us tonight.
No, I don't have any projects to show you because I have been really busy and not done much, but it was my niece's first birthday on Saturday, so I have some pictures of her.
Oh, good. I started to bring a teddy bear washcloth to show you what I've been working on.
Is it like summer?
No, it's just the washcloth.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah.
Well, we put them. Look at those little rosy cheeks. She's chewing on the teacup?
Yeah, she's got.
Oh, she's big blue. She is adorable.
They live in Savannah, like just down the street. Not Savannah.
Oh, okay.
Savannah, just housing area.
Little angel. Oh,
So cute. But she's so we had her first birthday. She was not a fan. Mom has been very particular about sweets with her, so this is her first like real sweet. So
thanks. Thank you.
had a lot of fun.
What's her name?
Her name is Lisa. She's named after her grandmother. Yeah, here's her with my sister and her cousin on the other side.
Oh. Don't you have somebody to grow up with and play with? Yes. Oh.
And then my sister, she painted this plate for her birthday.
Oh, wow. Oh, and there's a quilt.
Oh, I knew that.
Is this a quilt?
Yeah. And then we also got a picture, really cute picture of my nephew. He's 3 now?
No hair at all.
Yeah. He's like my sister. She was just like a little fuzzy coconut for like 2 years.
She didn't have hair from first year. It was all just out. Now, so whose child is that?
So I have two sisters. I have two younger sisters. So Lisa is my middle sister's daughter, and then my youngest sister, her baby's name's Harley.
Three girls. That's what we have. Really? In the middle.
It is time.
I'm the oldest, and I'm the oldest.
And I'm the youngest, but I'm also the tallest.
That's just not fair, right?
I think we're that way too. Once you get taller, you have to learn to share this.
I always thought Laura was taller, but whatever.
She was
Okay.
5'2", I remember. I'm 5'3". Because
Wow.
She read a 17 magazine. That's not even a- And she was crying. She said, "It says if you're 5'2" and has a blue, you'll never be a mom." Oh, that's okay. Oh my God. You'll be something wonderful. We're so glad you will be a mom. I didn't tell her that part.
Okay, book 4, or as Milton titled it, the 4th book. So last week, I just read through my version of. So I thought I'd do that since this. So maybe we can get through it, the whole thing tonight, and see. But whatever. And it should be lined up with what I'm reading with what's on the screen, I hope. But I'll try to scroll. Okay. Confused and bothered by his lack of success, the tempter stood and didn't know what to say. His intent discovered, the hope he had, and the persuasive rhetoric that slid from his tongue that had won over Eve, but here had so little impact. But I wonder what he meant by that. Eve was Eve. So far, he was overmatched, and being self-deceived and rash, had not properly weighed the strength he had to deal with, nor his own. But as ever lost due to his cunning, overreached where he thought less of his opponent, to soothe his participation and just for spite would still be tempting him who still defeats him and never stop, though it would shame him more. Just like a swarm of flies in harvest who fly about the winepress where the freshly crushed juice of grapes is poured, are beaten off, and return often with their humming sound. Or like surging waves against a solid rock, though dashed to bits, the vain attacks, and in froth or bubbles end. So Satan, who met with repulse after repulse and brought to shameful silence, doesn't give up, though desperate for some success, and persists in his vain pursuits. So what is Milton presenting Satan as? I mean, what one word could be used to describe him?
I don't know about one word, but like kind of, he's this vain force. Like he's unrelenting, but he's also ineffective.
Well, the word that I thought of was fool. I mean, because he's essentially tilting at windmills. He's just going at it time and time again, realizing he's overmatched, but still thinking, I can still take him. I can still take him. He brought him to the side of the high mountain, where he might behold another plain, long and narrow, washed by the southern sea. And on the north, the same length, the plain was bordered by a ridge of hills that protected the fruits of the earth and the homes of men from cold northern blasts. There in the middle, divided by a river, on whose banks an imperial stood on both sides, with towers and temples proudly built on. There's this. What city was built on? With decorated porches, theaters, baths, aqueducts, statues, and trophies, triumphal arches, gardens, and groves, Satan presented to Jesus' eyes a visual effect as if using a telescope. And then in Milton's phrasing, he uses the word, well, he says, optic skill of vision multiplied through air or glass of telescope. Basically, it's like zooming in on that particular scene. I mean, they're still in Israel, presumably, and he just draws his vision to Rome. It's kind of like ultra zoom. And so then he starts to describe Rome. The city that you see that no one else considers greater and more glorious than Rome, queen of the earth so far considered, and with the spoils of war enriched by other nations. There you see the capital above the rest, lifting its stately head, her impregnable citadel. And there, Mount Palatine, which is one of the 7 hills of Rome, the imperial palace, the structure built huge and high, the skill of the noblest architects, with sea from far off, with turrets and terraces and spires. Why does he think that Jesus would be attracted to this? Yeah. And Rome was bigger and grander than Jerusalem. So he's thinking, if he's a king, why wouldn't he want this? There may be many more beautiful buildings beside this one, more like houses of gods. So well I have placed my high microscope, so that you may see both outside and inside, pillars and roofs, carved work, the work of famed artists in cedar, marble, ivory, or gold. So, microscope here, and it just basically, it's not what we would consider a microscope. It's basically being able to zoom in even further and see deeper into a building. There, cast your eyes to the gates and see what processions issue forth or going in. Praetors, proconsuls hastening to their provinces, or on their return wearing robes of state. Civil servants with their rod bundles, the symbol of their power. Legions and cohorts, cavalry on horseback and wings, or ambassadors from far-off lands in various types of clothes on the Appian Road or the Emilian Road. Some from as far south as Syene, which is Egypt, where the shadow falls both ways. The shadow falls both ways. What could that possibly mean? I looked and did not find any. All I can.
My book has a note on it.
Oh, sweet.
So it says, Meroe, the Ethiopian capital on the Nile, thought by Roman authors to be an island, lies between the equator and so that shadows fall north in the winter and south in the summer.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean falls both ways at the same time.
No,
Oh, okay.
I guess it's like so it's a notation.
Okay. So it's in such a spot where, depending on the time of year, the shadow will be this way or that way. Okay. So yeah, it then mentions Moreau. in there somewhere. Yeah. Which is Nilotic Isles, which basically are islands on the Nile. And more to the west, the realm of Bacchus. Bacchus the first was the king of Mauritania. And where is Mauritania? I think.
I mean, I would assume just because we're talking about the Nile.
Well, it was a ship that sank, but basically it's Algeria. So let's see. So the realm of Bacchus that ranged up to the Blackmore Sea, which is just south of the Black Sea. Parthians among them from India and the Golden Chersones, which is an ancient Greek colony, and the furthest Indian island, Taprobane, which is an island in Sri Lanka, with dark faces with wrapped with white turbans. From France and Spain and the British in the west, Germans and Scythians and Sarmatians to the north beyond the Danube River to the Tauric Pool, which the Tauric Pool is probably the Black Sea. There's a group of people called the Tauri that lived in ancient Crimea. So that's what we think the Tauric Sea is, a Tauric Pool. Of course, Tauri is also a term used in Stargate. All nations now obediently pay tribute to Rome's great emperor, whose wide domain, ample territory, wealth and power, civility of manners, arts and arms, and long renowned, you rightly may prefer them to the Parthians. Besides these two thrones, all others are barbarous and hardly worth considering, and are so far away that they share the land among petty kings. Having shown you this, you have seen all the kingdoms of the world in all their glory. This emperor has no son, and now is old and lustful, and retired from Rome to the island of Capri, small but strong off the coast of Campania, which is where Naples and Salerno are. The purpose being to enjoy his private lusts, putting aside all public cares, and yet he is suspicious, hated by all and hating all. Just talking about the current emperor of Rome. He's talking about how he's hated and he's gone away and retired, and he's a lustful bad guy.
Didn't know you could retire from being emperor. I thought that was kind of like you're locked in for life.
I would think so. Well, what he probably did is hid away because people hated him. Probably retained his power, but he could go off to this remote location and do whatever he wanted to. With what ease, as possessing regal virtues as you do, appearing and beginning to do noble deeds, you might expel this monster from his throne, which he has made a sty, and ascending in his place, you will be a victor, freeing people from a servile yoke. Aha. So he's basically pointing out this emperor who's the worst of the worst and saying, and you could easily take over from him, freeing these people from a servile yoke. And he says, and with my help, you might just do it. The power is given to you. You should aim at no less the highest. And if you don't attain the highest, you will before you are on David's throne as prophesied. Wow. Oh, he knows. I mean,
in the last chapter, what did he tend to do? In 3, was it glory?
yeah. Well, he basically was saying, this is, he was timing of everything. And, if you do what I say, then you will be in power before any time passes. He's still kind of going on that, but
So it's still the
yes,
argument. Okay.
Yeah, the break between 3 and 4 is kind of interesting because at a little bit later in 4, he changes the tune where he brings him to the top of the temple. Actually, is the shortest of the temptations gained. I mean, it's with the last 150 or 200 lines.
The ramp up felt really slow, and then it was like it spiked, and then
Yeah.
you're immediately done.
Yeah. To whom the Son of God, unmoved, replied, "This grand and majestic show of luxury, even though you call it magnificent, is more pleasing to my eyes than your show of arms, much less my mind. Though you should add to your tale their on citron, which is a wood from it's a North African tree prized for household furniture, or marble tables." He's basically talking about furniture. "For I've also heard, or perhaps have read, their wines of Cetia, Cales, and Falern, Chios, and Crete, and how they drink it from gold, crystal, and fine studded with pearl. You should tell me who thirsts hungers still." Then there's the, oh, by the way, the things that he listed: Cetia, Calais, Falern are famous Roman vineyards. Chios and Crete are famous Greek vineyards prized by Romans. "What honor is that but tedious waste of time to sit and hear so many hollow compliments and lies and outlandish flatteries? Then begin to talk of the emperor, how easily subdued by flattery, how gloriously. I will, you say, but what if I, in addition, expel a devil who first made him this way? Let his tormentor, his conscience, sent for him, nor yet to free those people who were once victors, but now are vile and base, deservedly made vassals." So that's an interesting statement, that I'm not here to save these people who are getting what they deserved. This is a opinion of Milton's. Milton, when he was in his studies and I understand that he actually taught a couple of people, like as a tutor. But in his writings, he also taught that tyranny was the outward political expression of an inward corruption and enslavement of one's reason to bodily desires.
Like a culture deserves a tyrant, or like an individual becomes a tyrant when they only act upon.
So it makes it, I mean, the distinction is who is
Societal level, I guess, is
well, when you think about tyrants, how do a lot of tyrants come to power?
the greed of other people, I guess.
Yeah, because of either the apathy or the will of people who don't know any better. And it's like, look at me. Power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. Absolutely. So he talks about these vassals. He continues and he says, these vassals who at one time were just, frugal and mild and temperate, but governed poorly the nations under her yoke, pillaging their provinces, exhausted by all lust and rape. First, ambitions grow out of triumph and insulting vanity. Then cruelty by become accustomed to blood, and then pit men against beasts. They are luxurious by their wealth and still greedy, and from these daily scenes are effeminate. What wise and valiant man would seek to free degenerates, enslaved by themselves, or could make someone who is made a slave free them outwardly? So I had a question about that. Daily scenes are effeminate, and from these daily scenes are basically what Milton was saying is so the daily scene refers to all the the shows and the challenges, the fights, including gladiatorial combat, convicts, beasts. Milton says that daily exposure to such scenes makes one immune to bloodshed. I can understand that. You just kind of get used to it. And will make them womanish. So he, according to this view, any activity that allows the passions and affections, especially bodily desires, to take precedence over reason, tends to effeminate a man. I don't really buy that. But, okay.
That makes sense from like maybe a medieval standpoint.
Yeah.
That like everything was, there was like the four humors and the elements and like this idea that men and women were like two sides of the coin, which I don't think we have that idea so much now.
No.
But men being the like order side and women the
Emotional side.
Emotional side, yeah. So I can see what he's trying to say there. I don't know if that's the word.
I know what he's saying is just hogwash. So let's see. There we go. Therefore, when my season comes to sit on David's throne, it will be like a tree spreading and overshadowing all the earth, or as a stone that will dash to pieces all other monarchies throughout the world. And of my kingdom there will be no end. There will be means employed to do this, but what the means are is not for you to know or for me to tell. So he easily tosses aside that temptation, basically by saying, hey, it's going to be mine, and I'm going to spread over the whole world, and how it happens is not up to you, and I'm not going to tell you. So we can see, this is a little next section here, Satan gets a little testy. To Jesus, the tempter disrespectfully replied, I see how little you value all of the offers made by me. Jesus, the difficult and nice. Wait a minute. He's saying that the nice people are difficult because they enjoy contradicting people. His logic is severely flawed. Through all this, you should know also that what I offer I consider quite valuable, and I won't part with it for nothing. All this, which in a moment you beheld the kingdoms of the world, which I give to you, for they were given to me, and I can give them to whom I please, are no trifle. Yet on this condition, superior Lord, easily done, and worship all of me. What else does a gift so wonderful deserve? He doesn't get it. He just keeps pushing. Our Savior answered Satan with contempt. I never liked how you talk, and I like your offers less. Now I hate both, since you have dared to speak the abominable terms, your disrespectful condition. But I endure the time until the permission you have is expired. It is written, the first of all commandments, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God and propose to the Son of God to worship you who is accursed. Now even more accursed for this attempt, bolder than that on Eve, and more blasphemous. Expect to regret this. I'll regret this. The kingdoms of the world were given to you. Ha! You were permitted to remain and then usurp these things. You can produce. If they were given to whom other than the King of Kings, God over all supreme, if given to you, by you, how fairly have you repaid the giver? But gratitude to you is lost long ago. You were so void of shame as to offer them to me, the Son of God, offered to give me what's mine, on such a hated agreement that I fall down and worship you as God. That's an interesting section. So if they were given by whom other than the King of Kings, God over all supreme? If given to you, how have you thanked him? Basically saying, you talk about gratitude. Where's your gratitude? Get behind me. Oh, that sounds familiar. Plainly, you now appear to be that evil one, Satan, forever damned. I mean, he knows this. Plain by your attitude. Cain replies with fear and embarrassment. Oh, don't be so offended, son of God, though angels and men are sons of God. And if I challenge that you bear that title by being an angel, if I have suggested what I have received from men and angels, rulers of air, fire, air, water, and all the nations of the earth from all directions, spoke, and the world beneath came to be. Are you, whose coming was foretold to be fatal to me, it concerns me most. So what is he saying at the beginning here? You call yourself the Son of God, but men and angels are also sons of God. So what gives you the right to? He says, this test has not damaged you in any way, but rather you have more honor and more esteem than before. I have gained no advantage, missing what I aimed at. Oh, well, he's acknowledging that at least. Therefore, let all the kingdoms of this world pass, as they are temporary. I will no more advise you. Gain them as you want or don't. And you yourself seems disinclined to gain a worldly crown, addicted more to contemplation and profound arguments. I judge this by that time in your youth when you escaped the view of your mother and went into the temple, and was found among the most with them on points and questions more appropriate from the scribes sitting on Moses' chair, teaching and not being taught. So he's basically conceding, I will advise you no more. The childhood shows who the men will be daytime. Be famous then by wisdom as your empire must grow. So let your mind grow in the knowledge from all over the world and understand all things in it. Okay, will Christ gain knowledge from all over the world? No. I mean, he already knows all. I mean, he's God. I mean, basically, Satan is suggesting that Jesus employ a little humanism. All knowledge is not contained in Moses' law, in the Pentateuch, or what the prophets wrote. The Gentiles also know right in an admirable degree, led by the evidence of nature. And you must talk with the Gentiles much, winning them over by persuasion as you intend. Without their learning, how will you meet with them, or they with you, to hold a meaningful conversation? How will you reason with them, refute their idolatry, traditions, and paradoxes by his own words? What is here to Jesus?
So it seems like he's pivoted from his argument of like, you need to gain power to, oh, well, I guess you just want to be like a wise person that convinces everybody.
So saying you have to understand the Gentiles. Is that true? Actually, you kind of need to understand their language, their point of view, their traditions. Well, yeah, he knows. He knows how to approach them. I mean, I'm just saying from a human perspective, in order to understand people, you need to understand their culture. So, error is best revealed by his own words. Truer words were never spoken. Look once more before we leave this mountain from which you can see everything. Look westward or southwest. Behold, where on the Aegean shore a city stands, built with nobility, the pure air and the soil. Athens, the eye of Greece, mother of arts and eloquence, native to famous thinkers, or hospitable in her sweet pursuits, in the city or the suburbs and shade. So now he's switching which is the seat of power, to Athens, which is where Plato lived. In the north of Athens, there is an olive grove where Plato used to teach his students as they walked. That basically were paths in this grove, and he would walk around and teach them as they walked. And it became known as the Academy. Where the Attic birds are nightingales, numerous in Athens. I thought they were prevalent in England, but apparently there are nightingales in Greece. Where the Attic bird sings her thick warbled notes the whole summer. There the flowery hill Hymettus, with the sound of bees' industrious buzzing, often invites some to thoughtful musings. There its whispering stream. The river Ilissus originates on Mount Hymettus, which is famous for its honey and flows through Athens. Within the walls, view the schools of ancient sages. His who bred Alexander the Great to subdue the world, and Lyceum there, and next to it a painted stoa. Is basically it's a market. Athens, the stoa over the market in Athens was painted with frescoes by Polygnotus, or the site of public debate. There you will hear and learn the secret power of harmony in tones and poetry, basically hit songs. Aeolian charms and Dorian lyric odes, and he who gave them breath but higher sang blind, otherwise known as Homer, whose poem Apollo claimed his own. Aeolian songs and Dorian odes were two chief forms of Athenian lyric poetry. Melesigenes, never heard that term for Homer, but okay. Tragedians taught in either chorus or iambic trimeter the best teachers of moral wisdom, and were received with delight in short, pompous words, speaking of fate and chance and change in human life, best describing the high actions and passions of men. So what he's talking about is the presentation of the Greek tragedies, the songs, basically all teaching wisdom, moral wisdom. Not God's wisdom. Then those ancient speakers whose eloquence existed when wielded at will, the fierce democracy shook the arsenal and swept over Greece to Macedon and Artaxerxes' throne. Descended from heaven to the poor house of Socrates. Descended from heaven to Socrates? The interesting thing here is he says the poor house of Socrates. Socrates has always been imagined as being a poor but honest commoner. See there his home, who well inspired, the oracle pronounced him the wisest from words that impacted all the academic schools, new and old, with the peripatetics, Epicurean, and Stoic works that bear his name. So we have Socrates, Plato. Yeah. Let's see. Consider these here, or if you prefer, at home. That I thought was interesting. Consider these here, or go home and think about it, until time matures you to a kingdom of responsibilities. These rules will render you a king, complete with yourself, and much more when joined with an empire. Okay. So he's thinking human wisdom and human thought is the only thing that can make him a complete ruler. To whom our Savior wisely replied, "Don't you think I know these things? Or you think I don't know things I should? He who receives light from heaven from the source of light needs no other doctrine than those stated as true. But what you have told me is false, or nothing else but dreams, conjectures, fancies, built on nothing firm. So it basically says all the stuff you're telling me is hogwash, baloney. The first and wisest of them all said that he only knew that he knew nothing. Who said, all I know is that I know nothing? Socrates. The next smarter man took to telling fables and prideful tales. So the next smarter man, the third smarter man, so the third smartest man is or skeptics. He taught that no knowledge. Others happiness a virtue, but a virtue joined with riches and long life. Yeah. This is Aristotle. It says that it's best for pleasure and external goods to accompany virtue, and that they normally do. He was smart, but I don't think he was that smart. He engaged in physical pleasure with careless ease. The Stoic is the last to show philosophical pride, called a virtue by him, and is a virtuous man, wise, perfect in himself, and possessing everything, considers himself equal to God, and he often says he fears neither God nor man, and condemns wealth, pleasure, pain, or torment, death and life, which, when he lists them, he claims that he can leave these things behind as a boast. But all his tedious work is a vain boast or subtle shifts of his convictions to evade judgment. So that's a convicting statement. Basically, you have the Stoics who basically put aside everything. They say, I don't care about death. I don't care about life. I don't care about this, and this. But it's all just vanity. Alas, what can these men teach and not mislead, being ignorant of themselves and ignorant of God much more, and how the world began and how man fell of his own actions, depending on grace to save him? They talk much of the soul, but it's all wrong. And in themselves they seek virtue, and to themselves give all the glory and give none to God, but rather accuse him under the usual names of fortune or fate, as one claims to disavow mortal things. Whoever seeks for true wisdom in mortal things doesn't find it, or by delusion sees only a resemblance of wisdom, which is an empty cloud. So what is Jesus saying here about human knowledge and wisdom? Yeah, it's pointless. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to dive into that one. However, wise men have said that many books are wearisome, and whoever reads incessantly and doesn't bring into his reading a spirit and judgment equal or superior to it, and if he brings it, why does he need to seek it elsewhere? He remains uncertain and unsettled. So he's saying, don't read books unless you're going to think of something superior. Yeah. Unsettled. He who is deeply versed in books and shallow in it becomes crude or intoxicated, collecting meaningless toys and trifles that are worth a sponge, as children gathering pebbles on the shore. I think this is the actual point here, where if you gain all this knowledge from books, but you have no character, then you're just full of yourself. Ecclesiastes 12:12. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless and into the body.
Yeah, there's a Christian YouTuber that I'll watch occasionally, and I was watching a show the other day, and he was talking about how there's a lot of people nowadays, a lot of Christians nowadays who get called theologically obese. Like they like love reading theology and debating all these minutiae, but they're like not actually serving or participating in their church.
Yeah.
So they're not actually applying any of the theology that they're learning.
They're intellectual Christians.
Yeah.
But it hasn't reached their hearts yet.
Yeah. I like that term, theologically obese.
Yeah. Or if I would be happy in my private time with music or poetry, where else can I find solace as in our native language? Our native language being?
What's the word? First with an A.
Well, I mean, that's what Jesus spoke. So it's either Hebrew or Aramaic. All our law and stories are spread with hymns, our psalms inscribed with poetry, our Hebrew songs and harps that so well pleased our victor's ear in Babylon, declared that Greece got these arts from us. The loudest of the vices of their gods and their own, hymn or songs, so impersonating their ridiculous gods and putting themselves to shame. Wow. So he's basically saying the Jews came up with all this stuff, and it's so good that Greece basically says it came from them.
That's interesting. I don't know if I've heard that argument.
I haven't either. That's a new one for me. Remove their growing insults, laid as thick as makeup on a prostitute's cheek. Would Jesus really do that? Say that? I mean, okay. The rest lack profit or delight, and will be found far from the worth to compare to Zion's songs. To all true tastes excelling all songs, where God is like men, the holiest of holies and his saints, inspired by God, not so much by you. Unless where moral virtue is expressed by the light of nature, not completely lost. Here he gets a little dig in at Satan. He's saying, these things are inspired by God, not so much by you. I mean, how many songs were written to Satan? I mean, some rock songs, but their speakers you extol as the most eloquent statesmen indeed, and lovers of their country, as it seems. But better yet, listen to our prophets as men divinely taught, and the better to teach the solid rules of civil government in their majestic than all the speakers of Greece and Rome. It's the simplest thing taught, and the easiest to learn, what makes a happy nation and keeps it so, and what ruins kingdoms and lays cities flat. These only, with our law, best form a king. Ooh. So basically, he's saying all this stuff that you're telling me about Roman and Greek thought and all this baloney, I don't need it. All I need is what was taught in the Bible. Although Jesus didn't need the Bible, but he said, our law best forms a king. So spoke the Son of God, but Satan, at a loss for words, for his darts were all used up, replied to our Savior with a stern brow. Since neither wealth nor honor, arms or arts, kingdom or empire pleases you, and nothing proposed by me is to be considered either contemplatively or actively, and results in glory or fame, what do you want in this world? The wilderness is the best place for you. I found you there, and there you will return. Yet remember what I foretold to you. Soon you will have a reason to wish that you had not rejected my aid offered nicely or cautiously, which would have put you on David's throne in little time and little effort, or on the throne of the whole world now at the right age. In your season, when prophecies of you are best. Interesting that Satan uses the term in the fullness of time. He doesn't understand the fullness of time. Now, on the other hand, aught in heaven or heaven write aught of fate. If I read your horoscope by what the numerous stars or constellations say about you, it gives me the ability to your future, and I see in you sorrows and labors, opposition and hate, scorns, reproaches, injuries, and lastly, cruel death. They predict a kingdom for you, but what kingdom, real or allegorical, I can't figure out, nor when it happens. Sure, it's eternal, as without end, without beginning, for no date is given to me on the starry rubric. So he's basically saying, I can see in your future that you're going to die and you're going to face all these things. So how's this kingdom going to happen? Saying this, for he took the Son of God back to the wilderness and left him there, pretending to disappear. Darkness rose as daylight faded and brought her shadowy offspring, both unsubstantial of light and light. Which kind of is a redundancy there. Our Savior, meek and with untroubled mind after his high travels, though hurrying quickly, hungry and cold, he found a place to rest, where, under a covering of branching arms intertwined with thick covering that might shield his head from the dews and dampness of night, sheltered, but couldn't sleep, for at his head Satan watched him and soon gave him ugly dreams that disturbed his sleep. What does that remind you of? What's before she falls? Yeah, when Satan finds Eve in paradise, he kind of as a frog, I think is, and whispers in her ear these bad dreams. And from north and south, from both poured torrential rain, mixed with reconciled in ruin. What does that mean? Water with fire reconciled in ruin. Well, he's saying that there's thunder and lightning, but water with fire. I'm guessing that the fire is from lightning. What he's basically saying is water and fire are both destructive, and that's how they're reconciled. The winds continued within their stony caves, but rushed from the four hinges, which are the four cardinal compass points, of the world, and fell in the cursed wilderness, whose tallest pines, though rooted as deep as the tree was tall, and the sturdiest oaks bowed their stiff necks to the stormy blasts, and were torn up from the ground. Poorly were you covered then, O patient Son of God, yet only you stood unshaken. And the terrors didn't stop there. Infernal ghosts and hellish furies surrounded you. Some howled, some yelled, and some shrieked. Some threw at you their fiery darts while you sat unbothered in calm and sinless peace. This is how the foul night passed, until beautiful morning came forth with steady steps, wearing gray shrouds, who with a radiant finger stilled the roar of thunder, chased the clouds, and laid the winds and ghostly spirits which Satan had raised to tempt the Son of God with dire terrors in the night. And now the sun with more effective beams had cheered the face of the earth and dried the wet drooping plant or dropping tree. The birds, who saw all things now more fresh and green, after a storm so destructive, sang out their best songs in bush and branch to congratulate the sweet return of morning. That's kind of neat. And amidst this joyous and bright morning, Satan was not gone, after all his mischief was done. He also seemed glad of this fair change and came to our Savior. Yet he came with no new temptation. They were all spent. Rather, by this, his last affront resolved, desperate to find a better course, to vent his rage and madness for having been repelled so often. Him walking on a sunny hill he found, backed on the north and west by a thick wood. Out of the woods he steps in his normal appearance, in a careless mood, spoke to him these words. Good morning to you, Son of God, after such a dismal night. I heard the racket, and earth and sky would join together. Kind of like he wasn't there. But I was distant, and these storms, though mortals fear, as dangerous to the pillared frame of heaven or to earth's dark ground underneath, are generally considered harmless, if not wholesome, as a sneeze to a man's lower universe, and soon are gone. What? So he tries to conjure up this storm to frighten Jesus, and he greets him in the morning, and he says, these storms are nothing, it's like a sneeze. Yet as oftentimes are harmful when they affect man, beast, plant, wasteful and turbulent, like the turbulence in the affairs of men, over whose heads they roar and seem to point, they often foreshadow and threaten evil. They often foreshadow and threaten evil. Oops. So he's saying the storm was like foreshadowing. That was this storm's purpose in this desert. Like men will do to you, for only you live here. Didn't I tell you that if you rejected the perfect timing to win your predestined seat with my help, that it will prolong everything to the whim of fate? So pursue your way of gaining David's throne. What no man knows the timing of it, for both the when and how isn't revealed. You will be what you are ordained to be, I have no doubt. For angels have proclaimed it, but concealing the time and the means. Each action is done best when it must be, but when it may be the best time. If you don't see this, be sure to find what I foretold to you, many a hard path fraught with dangers, adversities, and pains before you get firm hold of Israel's scepter. Just like the ominous night that closed in around you, so many terrors, voices, prodigies may warn you as a sure sign of things to come. So spoke Satan, while the Son of God continued on his way and briefly answered him. So it's like Jesus gets up, beautiful morning, starts walking around, and Satan's just following him.
Well, it's also weird that he's like, oh, that storm was a sign that you're gonna have a bad time, but he made the storm.
Yeah.
Which is
It's not really a sign if you make it. You'll find that I'm no worse than wet. The terrors that you spoke about did me no harm. I never feared that they could, even though they were loud and threatening closely. What they can do as signs predicting bad things, I condemn as false signs, not sent from God, but from you. And knowing you, I will reign regardless of your efforts to stop me, noticeable in your offered assistance, that I, if I accepted, might seem to hold all of your power, ambitious spirit. And you would think that you were my God. You storm and rage at having been so persistently refused. Stop your efforts, for your motives are discovered and your labor in vain, and to try to hurt me is a foolish thing. To the Son of God, Satan, now swollen with rage, replied, Then hear me, O Son of David, virgin born. I still have doubts that you are truly the Son of God. I have heard all the prophets speak of the Messiah. The first I heard of you was of your birth, announced by Gabriel, and of the angelic song in the field outside Bethlehem that was heard that night, that sung of you, born as the Savior. From that time, rarely have I stopped watching you in your infancy, your childhood, and your youth, and lastly, your manhood, though you were raised in seclusion. Until at the ford of the Jordan, where all flocked to the Baptist, I among the rest, not to be baptized, heard pronounced by a voice from heaven that you are the beloved Son of God. From then on, I thought you worth my attention and closer scrutiny, that I might learn to what extent you are called the Son of God, as it makes no sense. I am also the Son of God, or was, and if I was, I am. Relations don't end. All men are sons of God, yet I thought you, in some respect, far higher beings, so declared. Therefore, I watched your steps from that hour and followed you still to this wild wasteland, where, by all best guesses, I gather you to be my fatal enemy. Good reason, then, if before I approach you, I seek to understand my adversary, to understand who and what he is, to understand his wisdom, power, and intent. Then by parley, or how you are made, by truce or partnership, to win him or win from him what I can. So he's basically saying, I don't understand how you're the Son of God because I'm a son of God. So because of this declaration, I decided to follow you, and I don't get it. I've had opportunity here to try you, test you, and I confess that I have found you immune from all temptation, as firm as a rock and centered, firm to the best of mere men, both wise and good, not more. For you have condemned honors, riches, kingdoms, and glory, and you may again. Therefore, I must begin another method to know what more you are than man that makes you worth being named the Son of God by a voice from heaven. You puzzled? Or you just...
What's it gonna take me eventually?
He's got one more thing up his sleeve. Saying this, he took off with Jesus and without help from a hippogriff. Any idea what a hippogriff is?
Harry Potter? Okay, the horse.
It might be. It's heroes and other epic poems write on hippogriffs or other monsters. Geryon in Dante's Inferno, or the hippogriff in Ariosto's Orlando Furioso. It may be in Harry Potter. I don't know.
It's like a bird horse.
Yeah,
Like a griffin,
the
but it's a
word
giant.
the word hippo in I think it's Latin or Greek means horse. So it could be a winged horse or Pegasus. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, they flew high through the air, over the wilderness and over the plain until underneath them was beautiful Jerusalem, the holy city, with high towers and higher yet the glorious temple, from far off appearing like a mountain of alabaster topped with golden spires. There on the highest place he set the Son of God and added with scorn, "Stand there if you'll stand. I'll ask you to stand there if you're able. I brought you to your father's house, the highest place, as the highest is the best. Now show your children. If you won't stand, cast yourself off. If you're the Son of God, as it is written, for he will give his angels orders concerning you to protect you in all your ways. On their hands they will lift you up, so that you do not strike your foot against a stone." So what basically he wants is for Jesus to cast himself off the temple to show all the people below that he will be lifted up by angels. And Jesus replied, "It is also written, you should not tempt the Lord your God." He said and stood. But Satan, struck with amazement, fell. As when the earth's son Antaeus, to compare small things with larger, fought with Jupiter's Alcides in Arasa, and often defeated, still rose, receiving from his mother earth new strength, fresh from his fall, and in a fiercer battle, defeated at length when held in the air, died and fell. Antaeus was the son of Gaia, the earth. Alcides is Hercules, the son of Jove, whose maternal grandfather was Alceus. According to legend, when they wrestled, Antaeus received renewed vigor each time he touched the earth, so Hercules defeated him by holding him off the ground and strangling him. So basically, he's comparing Satan to Antaeus. You know, you keep coming back for more, because every time Antaeus touched the ground, he got new strength. So even so, after so many defeats, the proud tempter, renewing his fresh assaults amidst his pride, fell from where he stood to see his victor fall. And as that Theban monster posed her riddle, any idea what the Theban monster is? The Sphinx. And whoever solved it is not devoured. And once Oedipus found out and solved it, for grief and spite she threw herself from the cliffs of Thebes, so struck with dread and anguish, defeated the fiend, and to his crew that sat offering advice and brought joyless celebrations of his hoped success, but ended with the ruin, desperation, and dismay of whoever dares to proudly tempt the Son of God. So the story of the Sphinx goes, the Sphinx had the head and breast of a woman, the tail of a serpent, the body of a dog, wings of a bird, the paws of a lion, and the voice of a human, devoured all who could not answer her riddle until Oedipus solved it. And the answer to the riddle was man. So just as Jesus, as man, has defeated the riddling Satan.
Well, and it's interesting that he has the example of Hercules and whatever the other guy's name was, because both of them were demigods. They were both half divine, half
Yeah.
human.
Which probably were actually demons, but whatever. Yeah. So Satan fell, and right away a fiery globe of angels flew close on full wings, who, on their plumy wings, received him gently from his uneasy position on the top of the temple. So Satan fell, and then these angels come and take Jesus off of the temple and lifted him as if on a floating couch through the joyful air. Yeah, we're going to finish this. Yeah, it's just 8 o'clock now. Sweet. Then in a flowery valley set him down on a green bank, and set before him a table of heavenly food, divine ambrosial fruits fetched from the tree of life, and from the fount of life ambrosial drink, that soon refreshed he who was weary and satisfied his hunger, if he was impaired by hunger or thirst. I think that would be as if he was impaired by hunger or thirst. And as he fed, angelic choirs sang heavenly anthems of his victory over temptation, the proud tempter. And now we have a song from heaven. True image of the Father, whether enthroned in the bosom of bliss and understanding the light of light, or remote from heaven, enshrined in a fleshy tabernacle in human form, wandering the wilderness. Whatever place, habit, state, or motion, still expressing the Son of God, with godlike force, opposed the one who attempted to usurp your Father's throne and the thief of paradise. He who long ago you did utterly crush and cast him down from heaven with his whole army. Now you have avenged fallen Adam, and by vanquishing temptation has regained the paradise that was lost and frustrated the fraudulent conquest. From now on, he nevermore would dare set foot in paradise to tempt, as his snares are broken. For though that seat of earthly happiness was lost, a better paradise is founded now for Adam and his chosen sons, who you, as Savior, have come down to restore, where they will be kept secure, and when the time comes, nevermore fearing the tempter and temptation. But you, infernal spirit, you will not rule in the clouds for long. Like an autumnal star or lightning, you will fall from heaven, put under his feet. For proof, when you feel this wound, not your last or deadliest wound, received when he defeats you, and in hell you will hold no triumph. In all her gates, hell regrets your bold attempt. So this particular section here, the angels are singing, and they sing to Satan, and they basically say, you're not going to rule here for long. And when you're done, when you have your final wound, which is not the deadliest wound, he's going to defeat you, and you will be in hell, and you will not rule. Basically says, hell regrets your bold attempt. So essentially, the hell that Satan ruled in Paradise Lost will be gone. It'll be, I guess, a new hell, where it's just a lake of fire. But from here on to eternity, learn with awe to dread the Son of God. He, completely unharmed, will chase you, and with the terror of his voice from your demoniac holds a foul possession. You and your legions yelling, they will fly and beg to hide them in a herd of swine, unless he commands them down into the deep, bound and to torment them, sent before their time. That's an interesting reference to Legion. Hail, Son of the Most High, heir of both worlds, defeater of Satan. On your glorious work now enter and begin to save mankind. Thus they sang of the Son of God, our meek Savior, and refreshed from the heavenly feast, went on his way with joy. He, unseen, privately returned to his mother's house. Interesting. He goes to his mother's house.
I was expecting Mary to show up at the end, because she was in like the first part, and she just didn't.
Yeah, it's no, that's true. I mean, it's not like he went to his home. I mean, you would think he would go back to where John was, but I mean, I guess he would go back to Mary and then start gathering the apostles. But yeah, it's an interesting place to end. So, thoughts on the entire work, on this book, on sections?
I liked it in the way that it ended. The fact that it ended with like Satan falling a second time,
Mm-hmm.
I thought was a cool parallel to draw to the original. And just a cool like visual.
Yeah.
You know, because in the Bible, like this happens so quickly, and like Satan just leaves.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like hanging out with angels. Jesus. And it all just happens very quickly.
Yeah.
So I liked that the end is so like dramatic. Like in 560, like Jesus gives this speech of like, you know, oh, sorry, no, so Satan's like, cast yourself down. And then Jesus is like, also it's written, tempt not the Lord thy God. And then Satan's like, what? Like, it's just so intense.
Well, when he says that, I mean, before Satan is basically saying, okay, you're a son of God, I'm a son of God. What makes you so special? And now he basically says, tempt not the Lord thy God. Basically, I'm God. I'm the guy who threw you out of heaven. And that's when Satan goes, oh.
It's just so like, it's just such a dramatic moment.
Yeah, I mean, it says Satan was struck with amazement and fell. So Jesus says, I'm God. And Satan goes, oh, crud, and falls. And I mean, you're right, that parallel to Paradise Lost, where he falls out of heaven, it's like, well, where did he go? I mean, he didn't go back to hell at this point. I mean, he just went to, I mean, he's a spirit, so it's not like he's going to get hurt or anything. But yeah, it's an interesting parallel. But I do like how it's very, very simple. Tempt not the Lord thy God, and then Satan falls. Because there's that realization.
Like, honestly, this entire book has felt so different than Paradise Lost.
It is.
And I think it's because Paradise Lost feels like a true epic.
Mm-hmm.
This feels more like a dialogue. Like, I don't know if you've ever read The Consolation of Philosophy.
No.
I haven't read all of it, other parts of it. But in that work, it's like this guy named Boethius, and he's talking to the embodiment of philosophy, and they're having this conversation about his situation. And this feels so much more like that than an epic poem.
Yeah. You're right in that it's not a traditional epic. And it doesn't really have all of the characteristics of an epic, but it is still considered an epic. This is, I guess, the exception to the rule. But I mean, there are lists. It does start in the middle of things. I mean, you have an epic hero who is Jesus at this point, and you have the challenges. And I mean, there is most of the features of an epic poem are covered here. But you're right in that it's more of a conversation than great deeds. Although the great deed is overcoming temptation.
There just isn't a ton of action.
Right.
Not a lot happened. It's just them talking for 95% of it.
The biggest difference that I see between Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained is the style of the language. I mean, the language, I mean, it's still bad punctuation. And it's still a little challenging to understand at times, but the language in Paradise Lost, even if you don't understand a section, you can see the beauty of it. The description of paradise, and Adam and Eve walking through the garden, and I mean, just there's cinematic visuals in Paradise Lost that you don't really have here. That last scene with Satan falling off the temple is probably the most significant cinematic. But I think back to the point where Eve brings the bough of fruit back to Adam, and Adam has this crown of flowers that he was making her, and then he sees her and just drops it. It's like, oh. I mean, there's so much more emotional impact in Paradise Lost than there is here.
It feels so simple comparatively.
It is.
Like, Paradise Lost feels so grand and like opulent and overwhelming, like the senses, like it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
The descriptions and everything. And this just feels like so small and simple and plain.
And do you know why?
I mean, I think it it makes sense. Like in the first book, we're in paradise and we're in heaven and we're in hell, like, or we're traveling through the future, like at the end of the book.
Yeah.
But here we're like in the fallen world, in the wilderness, and it's just Jesus.
So I think the difference is that in Paradise Lost, since we can't really imagine what it's really like, heaven, hell, paradise, you're right, it can be overwhelming. The descriptions are just so amazingly presented, that you can kind of get a vision of maybe what it's like. Here in Paradise Regained, it's, as you said, it's here on earth, whether it's in the wilderness, on a mountaintop looking at cities, whether it's on the top of the temple, it's still earth. We can identify with that, so it's easier for us to picture the setting. So yeah, Paradise Lost is grander in that respect. In the setting, there's a much larger cast of characters in Paradise Lost, especially when you go into hell and you see they have this meeting with all the demons and this demon and that demon, and there's this list of demons that are there. There's not really many lists in Paradise Regained. There are a couple, and they're pretty small. But the other thing that I see is the similarity between the two is how much of Greek and Roman mythology Milton brings into the story. Talking about the Theban monster, Antaeus. I mean, just all these things to, and of course, the people who were reading it when it was first published probably knew all these stories because they were most likely pretty well educated. If you could read, you'd be well educated. That's not true now. Say no more.
In actual fact, paradise won't really end until Jesus returns.
Right.
That's kind of not a real good name for it.
Well,
It was fought for, and right, but the earth is not there.
right. The Milton, I believe, wrote it this way because it is a parallel with Paradise Lost, the temptation of Eve and Adam versus the temptation of Jesus. One succumbed to the temptation, the other defeated the temptation.
Okay.
That's why I believe he used this particular passage as the basis. I mean, if he did Revelation would have been a much grander epic, and a much longer one. I mean, Revelation by itself could be an epic. I mean, the whole Bible is an epic story. I mean, it's fairly simple to see. But
Yeah, so he put paradise away. Or coming eventually, or something like that.
well, but I mean, and honestly, it was just beginning his ministry. It's not finished, but from the perspective of God and the divine plan, I mean, it said at the beginning that Satan was allowed to tempt Jesus. He was given this ability by the Father to tempt the Son. The idea being that, I mean, God knew perfectly well that Jesus could resist this temptation, but he had to go through this temptation for our benefit. So that's
Paradise, I think the assumption is if paradise is renamed, then it's like back to how it was. But maybe he meant it more in the sense of like the first step to reestablishing paradise is like getting Satan out of paradise. So this is getting him out, and then the work of tending the garden can then begin, like.
to kind of putting Satan in his place,
Yeah,
so that
but-
Jesus can do his work.
Yes, and like the whole idea of like, is the kingdom of God
No.
the future paradise? And I don't know.
It's the literary parallels, I think, is the main reason why it was done this way. But also, I think if Milton looked at, well, I want to write Paradise Regained, and what do I base it on? Well, obviously, your first thought would be Revelation, and he looks at Revelation and goes, no, that's a little much. So, yeah, it's not done. Yeah, Paradise Regained, it's the wrong tense. Yeah, paradise that will have been regained. The future, past, yeah. No, and I totally understand. I agree that, I mean, from a theological perspective, Paradise Regained happens at the beginning of, I mean, before even his ministry starts. He's just been declared Son of God at the baptism. So he hasn't even gotten his first apostles yet. So it's the beginning of the process. But I mean, is this temptation allowing him to move forward with the process? This defeat of Satan's temptations? I mean, he's Jesus, he's Christ. No matter what happens, he would have proceeded with his plan. I mean, that's just how it is.
Well, but I think what maybe Milton, and I don't know if this is necessarily biblical, but maybe the point of this in Milton's argument is like clearly the climax was Satan realizing who Jesus was.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the like why why Milton thinks that this story in the Bible is important, because it's when Satan realizes what's happening, if that makes sense.
Well, so in the Bible, in the story from Matthew 4, do you get the sense that Satan doesn't really know who Jesus is?
I mean, I don't, again, it's so short.
If he knew, think of this, if Satan knew in Matthew 4 who Jesus truly was, does he really think those temptations would have worked? It's worth a try.
Maybe he was okay then.
Yeah.
Because the Lord, they felt so.
Yeah, that's true. But even half man or half God, or fully God and fully man, he's fully God and fully man. I mean, that fully God part is the part that threw him out of heaven. So honestly, I understand the reason for using this tale, this story from the Bible. And if Satan truly did understand who Jesus was from a biblical perspective at the beginning of the temptations, would he have done it? Probably because he was directed to. But he also would know that it wouldn't have any bearing, because if he knows who Jesus is, he knows Jesus isn't going to fall. So that doesn't stop him, no. But there's always that hope. I mean, Satan lives on hope. Hope of despair, I guess, but yeah. So. So after much consideration, I emailed Charles, and I asked him what he thought about me doing a class on Pilgrim's Progress. And he was like, well, I've never done it in the church. He does it with the homeschool kids. And he's like, okay. So I'll be preparing that over the summer, and we'll be doing that in the fall.
I read it in like 6th grade. It's been a little bit. I actually got a book over the weekend